Hello, everyone. We were just giving a few minutes to allow everybody to join, but it's 8:02, and I think most of us are here now. So we can begin on today's webinar about the growing demand for 3D models and how to optimize them for WebAR. So just a bit of housekeeping reminder that a recording of this 8Talk will be emailed to all registrants. And you can use the Zoom chat to shoot any questions throughout the discussion, and we will answer them at the end in our Q&A session. So joining us today, we have Rigel Benton, who's lead product designer at 8Wall. Hi.
Hi.
Pawel Nikiel, 3D automation lead at CGTrader Arsenal. And myself also from CGTrader. So welcome to you both. If you could please introduce yourselves briefly and tell us a little bit about your role and what your company specializes in.
Yeah, definitely. So thanks for having me. My name's Rigel Benton. I'm the lead product designer at 8Wall, and we are the leading WebAR platform with over 1,000 commercial experiences, having launched in just a few short years that we've been around. Our core offering is our WebAR engine. So this is something that we developed that runs entirely in browser and in 100% JavaScript. So what does this give you? It gives you markerless world tracking. So you can move around your space, and objects that you put on the ground can stay there, as well as image target detection and tracking. And that works with both flat and curved surfaces. So you can do bottles and cans. It's a big hit with packaging brands. And then face effects. So face effects, as I'm sure you're all familiar with, are always a lot of fun. And we even have our own media recorder in there. So you can record video all while tracking various objects in the world. And so that's like the first thing that we offer. And then this other thing is the cloud editor. So cloud editor and hosting is an all-in-one development platform where you can come to 8wall.com, you can develop these experiences and then instantly publish them to the mobile web with instant global publishing. So you can be sure that anywhere in the world that someone's accessing that experience, that they're going to get the fastest, best, highest quality version of it. So yeah, so anyway, I'm excited to be here.
Welcome.
Yeah, hi.
Pawel.
Hi, yeah, I'm super happy to be here and engage this discussion with Rigel. So I'm 3D automation lead at CGTrader. So the CGTrader started out as a 3D marketplace. We currently have over 1 million assets ready for you to use out of the box. No questions asked and no hustle needed. But a couple of years ago, we expanded into the B2B area. So we created the Arsenal platform. And when we realized how huge, how big was the rise in the demand for custom-made 3D products. So whether you're a retailer that would like to stand out in competition, or if you're a product brand and you want to present your awesome, perfect product that you worked on, designed for years, and now you try to find an immersive way of showing it, this is what we can help you with. So we basically can digitalize your assets. We can make them into the form that you can use online in WebGL or on the great platforms like 8Wall. So put them into AR. So you don't have to figure it out on your own. You don't need to get the expensive know-how because we have it. We're gaining it for years. So you can just use us to get you up to speed with the newest technologies.
Thank you. So welcome to you both. I think it's no secret the demand for 3D and AR is it's growing exponentially. If you could both just talk a little bit more about where you think that demand is coming from, and what's behind it. Why now?
A few years ago, 3D was associated only with VFX industry and gaming industry, but it had outgrown it. Right now we have the whole e-commerce side, and e-commerce is right now also transferred into 3D commerce. So basically, the world of internet presented us with new possibilities, and images are not it anymore. Right now you need more. Even the greatest graphic consortium in the world, so Kronos Group, created the 3D commerce working group to define what makes a good asset, an asset that can be used for e-commerce. So the rise in demand is probably one of the biggest issues with traditional methods like photography, was that to get your product digitalized, so if you wanted to have images of your product, you would have to pay for expensive photo shoot, and you're very limited in terms of time and money because it's expensive, and you have to, in terms of logistic, it's super hard. If you're dealing with big products like sofas, refrigerators, or whatever, then there's no way you can scale. There's no way you can shoot all of your products, right? You would have to choose just the crucial ones, and the others are sort of left out. So with the 3D, you're able to create with way lower cost and with much more flexibility all your assets, and they can not only be images, but also like 360 spinners, for instance. So you no longer limit the customer to one perspective you want him to see, but you also are able to make them see the whole product, turn it around, right? But this is, again, something bit of a past, because right now with rise of real-time technologies like WebGL, like augmented reality, sorry, you can also interact with your product in the web browser or on your mobile phone. So imagine a few years ago, you just looked at the image and you figured, okay, maybe I like this. Then you read all the description of the product. Let's say, okay, it has this feature, and every single product brand, let's say you're looking for a home appliance, a dishwasher, and you have some like, this is super awesome cleaning, and this is some extra bubbles, and you have no idea what it means. And another retailer or another product designer has totally different names, and you have to figure it out and basically get a PhD in dishwasher before you buy it. So right now, you imagine you just take the 3D asset and you play around with it. You can put it due to, for instance, 8Wall in your apartment on your mobile device, and you can, let's say, click on the features. You can see the animation. What does it actually do? So you don't have to comprehend all those weird words. You just see what it does, and based on that, you can make an informed decision. What do you actually want to purchase? So let's say you pick those 5 features that you liked, and then you can see what product does have those features, right? So this is probably the biggest
contributor, right? It's e-commerce
yes.
is really,
sorry,
really driving it.
I lost it. Yeah. So what I'm getting at is basically there's an evolution of the presentation, and this is something that you cannot ignore anymore. Like if you're not up for, like if you don't pursue it, you're basically behind. And especially last year shown that like if you're not online, like you're dead basically. So we have
there's
some
the
use
technology
cases.
side, and also you're basically saying that customer expectations are asking for,
Yes.
more information about products if they're going to be shopping online.
Yeah, definitely. And the habits change. Like you used to have to go to the shop, but you don't have to do it anymore. And do you really want to drive around, the town from shop to figure out which cars do you want? And you won't see the whole scope anyways. And online you can do it like without even leaving your home. You can place the model actually in your living room and see how it, how it works with your environment. So that's great. And we have like some actual use cases, like numbers to back up those theories. So Rolling Nation, so the shoe company, they got 39% higher conversion rate just by introducing 3D on their website. So basically you can see the shoe in 3D, and it already made almost 40% bigger conversion rate, which is huge. Another example is the one you can see right now on the screen. So Buster & Punch. This is the furniture company. So time spent on the website was increased by 50% just by introducing those new tech assets. And you can scan the QR code to see for yourself what you can get. And I think important thing to mention here is that this is WebAR. So you don't need any app. You don't have to download anything, install anything. So something that basically draws people away from apps. You can just do a technology like 8Wall. You can just use it as any other web browser asset. So you just click it and it's there. You don't have to do anything else. Maybe Rigel, you can follow up on this a little bit.
Yeah, no, I mean, those are all great points. I mean, a lot of the demand that we see are coming from our customers. So this is mostly brands and advertisers, and they love AR because of the immersive nature of the medium and like everything you pointed out on dwell time and interactivity, right? Being able to see these objects in your space, like these are all really important when pushing, potential customers further down the funnel to make a purchase. But then, what's unique to WebAR is that they can reach those users on the devices they already own in whatever browsers that they use. And they don't need to download an additional app, and they don't need to have a social media account to a particular thing. And you don't have to build it multiple times to accommodate multiple social media platforms. And so here's an example that uses 8th Wall for e-commerce. This was done by an agency in the UK called MXR for Mulberry. And Mulberry is a high-end fashion company. They produce bags like this one. What's really interesting about this campaign is using image targets on coasters that were distributed around Japan in bars. And so it gave customers an opportunity to see these high-end bags in this really very realistic style without needing to put all of these expensive bags in a bar setting where they could get damaged. So this was really successful, and MXR really had a great experience making these. If you go to the next slide. So this is an example by Draw and Code for Sony Music with Pink Floyd. So this was also a really great experience for Pink Floyd fans because it was a companion to the later years compilation set. So this is like a special edition box set. It included art and music, and then they had access to this WebAR experience where they could place this legendary cover art into their space. It even played the music from Pink Floyd. They could take an image of it, share it with their friends. So this got a lot of social engagement, and everyone was just really pleased with this. This also saw 2-minute average dwell time. So we're talking about how much time people are spending in the experience. When it comes to things like advertisements, 2 minutes is unheard of. Most people don't even spend that much time, in a video, right? Much less walking around outside, interacting with 3D content. So really exciting there. And it won an award. So this won a Telly Award. So next slide. So, and then finally, this example is pretty great. So this is for Porsche by Innovation Rocks in Austria. And this was a fold out insert inside of a magazine, a car magazine called AMS. And it allowed you to customize a Porsche Taycan EV and see what it looked like in all the different colors and wheel configurations. You could turn on the lights. So a lot of animations, really high-end, target market, but also a high-end experience, very realistic looking, lots of really nice touches with the real-time shadows. And then it had a call to action at the end to learn more about the car from a dealership. So this also was a very successful campaign. And Innovation Rocks has done multiple Porsche campaigns since this one.
You guys
I think it's like super, just small follow-up. Like I think it's worth mentioning, like if you look at the assets like this one or the purse, for instance, like you can see the increase in visual quality, right? Because like if you take a look at the leather and the shadows, like it's really awesome. It's no longer like real-time assets or mobile assets or AR assets, and specifically web AR assets. They're no longer bound to look like low-poly, like Minecraft, basically, right? They can actually look like proper renders. So
they're really realistic, which
cool progress. Yeah.
I mean, you guys talked a lot about the advantages of 3D and AR, and made some really good points there, and why e-commerce is jumping on this. So how important is a 3D marketplace like CGTrader, and how does this help in the development of WebAR?
Yeah, you want to start or should I?
Sure. I mean, I can go ahead. So
yeah, go ahead.
Speaking to our customers, right? I mean, having just seen some of these projects, right? It's like a lot of time and attention is spent on the 3D assets, right? And but the most critical constraint of a project like this is time. They may have a very short window to actually develop the experience and put it out there so that it looks this polished. And in time, especially with a small team size, can really hinder your progress with the depth of the experience. So that's where I think a lot of times a marketplace like CGTrader comes in. Is it allows for if they only have one 3D artist, they can just focus all of their time on like the key art, the custom thing that they need to represent from the client, but they can fill the space and really bring the experience to life with all of these other AR ready assets that they don't need to spend a lot of time optimizing or modeling or retexturing. And so that can really take an experience that maybe was just one model and really bring it into an interactive world that the end user can have, all within the same amount of time they were going to have budgeted to do just the one model.
Yeah, I think like you mostly spoke my mind. So regardless if you're an artist or a product brand or an agency, like you want to spend all your time, like time obviously is money. Maybe it's very obvious, but it is. So you want to spend your your resources just to make your actually key topic perfect, right? And everything else is just a canvas, and there's really no use in spending time or money on canvas. So you just use the marketplace and you find things that complement your perfect product, right? And if there's a lot of free assets, but even if you have to buy them, it's barely a fraction of money that you would have to otherwise spend on actually creating everything else just to showcase your assets. And with over 1 million assets, it's really easy to find something that can complement yours. So
And can you talk a little bit about the inventory of AR ready files?
Oh yeah, sure. It's huge. Yeah. So like you mentioned before, I think we'll still go to a bit technical details, but yeah, like we mentioned before, AR assets or any real-time assets are a specific type of assets. So you cannot be as free and as wasteful in terms of resources as you would with offline rendering. So we have few 100,000 real-time ready assets. So of course, not all of the million or 1 million, not all of the over 1 million models are AR ready, but I think there's like 200,000 or 300,000 real-time ready assets that can be used with platforms like 8Wall or in VR or in any real-time use case, right? So it's huge. They're GLTF and USDC. So, but I think we will get to technical discussion, right? So,
yeah,
not to spoil it.
No, that's great. Also hearing from the perspective of the artists as well, that they can utilize the marketplace. But in terms of designing, custom ones for brands and whatnot, what do these artists need to keep in mind when creating 3D models to be added to a marketplace like CGTrader?
Yeah, I think there are like 3 crucial components, and they all contribute into performance. So one, probably the first, maybe the most obvious one, is optimized geometry. So when you're working on offline asset, right? So something that you can model, you can place into your renderer, render it for 5 hours and have an awesome image. You don't have to care basically about any resources, right? So memory doesn't matter, VRAM doesn't matter, like nothing matters basically because you have your PC. But for real time, you need to, first of all, optimize geometry. So let's say you're working on an asset, it has like 3 million polygons, but there's no way mobile GPU can handle it. And even if it could, it's super unoptimal. So what you want to do is to reduce poly size. But of course you don't want to lose your details. So that's when you try to bake out some of the minor details to normal maps. You can also bake out ambient occlusion to give you this feeling of GI without having GI, right? To actual GI in the scene. So this is probably the first step, so optimize your geometry. And the second one are the textures. Like if you're creating materials for offline rendering, you can have basically a separate texture set for every single material on your model. So you can have like 10 texture sets. Each can contain like 4, 5, 6 textures. But if you want to create a real-time asset, you should probably bake them into one texture set, because it will, first of all, you reduce the size tremendously, right? Like imagine you have 10 4K textures in 10 times 5, so like 50 4K textures, and instead of that you should have like 4 or 5, and preferably 2K. So size matters. And the other thing, if you have just one material with one texture set, you reduce the draw cost. So basically how many times the mobile GPU has to recreate the product so it's actually shown on the screen, right? So each material, each shader makes up one draw cost. So if you can pack everything into one material, it's way more optimal, and you can increase the frame rate with reduced power. And the third one, of course, is the format. So like they're lightweight formats, so GLTF and USDZ, which also contribute to this idea of something like that lightweight, so something that can be used with low performance devices like mobile phones or like tablets, because even if their power has grown over years tremendously, it's still nothing in comparison to the PCs, right, or consoles. So those formats, so GLTF is widely adopted. It's adopted by Google, and it's basically the foundation of e-commerce, or 3D in e-commerce industry. And then you have the USDZ, which is some form of a USD Pixar format that was adopted naturally by Apple. So on iOS devices, you can use USDZ, and on everything else, you basically use GLTF. And all those three things contribute to the performance of the GPU, RAM, but also to the overall file size, which matters on the mobile phone, especially because you're on wireless network or you're on LTE, right? So you don't want to clutch your bandwidth with hundreds of megs of data just to get one model.
Yeah, no, GLTF is definitely what we recommend whenever you're using 8Wall, mostly because, yeah, it's interoperable, it's an open standard, it's very efficient, and so it has a lot of broad support. Unlike, file types like FBX, which might be owned by a single company, and it's difficult sometimes because they iterate each year, the file format changes and it loses features, it gains features. GLTF is meant to be backwards compatible and work across a whole slew of different settings. And so we definitely recommend GLTF when you're looking to make AR for the web. And then, yeah, like texture size is really important. The number of textures is really important, geometry, but we have found that like texture size is something in particular that, maybe like you have to just keep in mind that like when you're on a mobile phone screen, what is the perceivable quality of your object on that screen, right? Maybe, on your big TV at home or in a VR headset, an 8K texture or a 4K texture makes a lot of sense because you can just see it. So it's just so large, but on a screen that's in your hand, it's just sometimes you can't tell the difference between 2K and 4K. And if that's the case, right, reducing it from 4K to 2K might, boost your frame rate even more. And that's really important when it comes to mobile AR, so that when you're moving throughout the space, it's always, one-to-one with your real world movements.
Yeah, those are some really good points. Thank you both. And Rigel, from the perspective of WebAR, what are some of the limits to keep in mind for 3D assets?
Yeah, so this is a common question we get. And the surprising answer is that the constraints are not unique to WebAR, right? Like Pawel had mentioned, a lot of the things that you want to look out for in just real-time mobile, as opposed to like offline rendering, they all apply, right? So, if you want to increase your frame rate, like I was saying, it's like there are a lot of, sort of simple, straightforward solutions to how to optimize. But it's also a very capable place, right? The web is a powerful place for AR. It's a powerful place for 3D, you know, and here's one example here of real-time reflections running inside of WebAR. So, you know, if we could just play the clip back. So, you know, what's basically going on here is we have a 3D model in our scene, and the camera texture that 8Wall supplies is being rendered in real time as an environment map on these imported GLTF models. And so for, you know, for this example, you can see as the plant moves, there's like a subtle effect of the, you know, of like the opaque screen kind of coming back. And then you have more dramatic effects, like with the metallic skull against all the different colors that are in the camera feed. And then the car is another great one of just showcasing very realistic effects running. And again, all of this is happening in real time, you know, over 30 frames per second. We have PBR materials. These are real-time shadows, you know, and these are not, they're optimized, right? They're not millions of polys, but they're also not, you know, low poly, like, you know, blocky kind of Minecraft-like objects, right? Like these are definitely something that a customer would be proud to put as part of their brand. And then in this example, we have, this is a portal, which is a really popular way to display AR content now, because you can have both the real world and an entirely occluded virtual one where you're walking around and 6DoF tracking, and you kind of have this really nice effect. But you know, now we're building out an entire environment, and an environment takes a lot more assets, and you have to pack a lot more on the screen. And so you want to be especially vigilant with the way that you're bringing in those assets and how you're displaying them and what techniques you're using to get the most out of that experience. So it never dips below the frame rate that you're targeting for both high-end devices and lower spec devices, because that's, you know, a range that you want to make sure that you hit. You don't want a customer to, on a lower end phone, to try your experience and have a bad experience, right? So I always suggest that, you know, when you're testing, you always want to have at least 2 devices that you're kind of comparing against. But, you know, to put this in perspective, this scene has, you know, tens of thousands of polys and that you can, that's coming in and out of the frame. You know, we are doing a lot to make this, you know, really shine. We have a 4K skybox texture that you can see. We're using video textures with alpha material. That's what the shooting stars you can see are, or the blue ring around the portal. So all of this is running on a phone in real time. We even have real-time reflections running on the ring outside. It's really subtle, but it's there. Yeah, and then, you know, keeping, like Pawel said, you know, keeping the total storage size of the assets down, because you don't want to have to wait a really long time for, you know, the page to load. It is a web page that's loading, right? And so, you know, for this particular scene, we have about 15 megabytes of assets, which is generally fine on like an LTE or Wi-Fi. But, you know, there are things you can do to determine how fast the internet connection is, and then maybe changing the level of detail of the assets as they stream in. You know, and we've seen customers do similar things to that, especially if they're doing something like holograms or videos, where it becomes really easy to just take a bit rate and then change how the quality that's coming in based off of the internet speed. So there's a lot of really advanced techniques that you can be employed, but there's also simple ones, like a lot of the ones that Pawel mentioned, that you just want to keep out, you know, keep an eye out for when you're developing. And the last thing I want to mention about this is, while developing this experience, we started working on a feature that hasn't been announced yet. So I guess I'm sort of announcing it, but we have a new mobile debug mode that's coming very soon to our cloud editor. It will allow you to hit a toggle, and then on your phone, wirelessly connected to your cloud editor, it will display a bunch of real-time stats about the scene. So these are things like your frame rate, the number of textures in your scene, triangle count, all of that, but also really helpful things like the max texture size in your scene, where we sample all of the objects and we figure out, like, do you have a stray 8K texture that's like really bogging down, you know, your scene. And we're also displaying active image targets that are coming in and out as you cycle through them, what your load time is, so you can work on reducing that, and even your estimated app size. So taking all of the objects in your scene and then adding them up to see, if there's anything in particular that's really bogging it down when it loads. We also have like a real-time console that's streaming in all your console logs. And so anyway, look forward to that. I'm really excited to see how that'll help with this exact topic.
It really feels like there's a lot of technological change happening really quickly, sometimes faster than people are even realizing. Things becoming, so photorealistic, faster and everything. So can we talk a little bit about the future of 3D and AR and, the role of automation and AI? What kind of impact are these going to have in the near term?
I would say, first of all, automation. I believe one of the biggest challenges right now people have, and also the industry has, right? There's not enough 3D artists that are familiar with real-time asset preparation, and the ones that are there probably work mainly on games. So right now, 3D commerce or e-commerce, and so basically every product brand is struggling to get their low poly assets. And while they might have some high poly assets, for instance, created from their cut data, it's super hard for them to figure out the ways to transition to the low poly, right? So you have us, of course, to do it, but we're also trying to speed up the process to lower the cost for the customers. So one of the ways to do it are companies like Rapid Compact or Simply Gone or PXYZ. I'm not picking any favorite here. I'm just mentioning some that I'm familiar with, or Instalot. So with some automation algorithms, you're able to reduce the poly count with lesser effort than you would normally have to do with just manually going loop by loop and decimating the model or undecimating the model, etc. Right? So this is the automation part. And in terms of AI, what we do right now, for instance, what we're working on is that imagine you're working on an asset, right? You're working on a chair, let's say, and it has fabric and it has wooden legs. And if you're a 3D artist, you know that, and if you're not specifically focused on texture creation, it's a pain it's a pain to actually find the proper textures for you or proper materials for you, because you don't want to spend too much time on it unless this is just your area, like substance designer, for instance. So what we're working on is AI or machine learning, maybe more, that can recognize what sort of materials are used on this model and already give you some examples from our marketplace. So from our huge library of materials and textures, it can basically reference you the ones it feels would make the best job with this asset, right? So maybe you don't have to look on any website like Polygon or CGTextures or whatever. You'll just get it out of the box. So you just basically put a reference image, I'm working on this one, and give me the materials, and it will give you the materials from our marketplace or from any other resource, right? And next step is that it can actually create the textures for you. So let's say based on the knowledge of all the materials it's seen so far, and that was fed to it, and on the reference image, it can, maybe it cannot find exactly the same material, but based on this knowledge, it can combine some other ones, or using parametric design, so sort of like a node network like in Substance Designer, maybe it can create perfect texture for this asset based on the reference image you fed it, right? So I feel this is the somewhat near future, like we are working on this right now. So I hope it will come to light, at least from our end soon. So I think, this is the most important one. There are some future possibilities as well, but not to dwell too much into sci-fi. I think these are the key points to look at, right, at this point in time.
It's pretty amazing. I mean, if that's the near term, like that's really exciting. And how about you, Rigel? What kind of, what's your future vision for WebAR?
Yeah, obviously, one of the greatest bottlenecks in 3D commerce online has been being able to produce 3D models quickly that are realistic, and that you can, see in your space and get a real sense of what this would be like if it was really in front of you. And so, that's really exciting that like there is an opportunity there to help automate that process and then bring that to, enterprise customers who have these e-commerce sites that maybe don't have, legions of 3D artists just creating models all the time, but now they have something more akin to photography in a pipeline that they're used to in order to like create those models. We have a customer called Saatchi Art, which is an art reseller. And what's really exciting about what they've done is they've taken Eighth Wall and any art on their site, paintings and prints, you can visualize that on your wall in your room. And this has been an enormous hit for conversion and sales. But also it's just exciting because it scales across all of their art. But that imagine like being able to do that, but for 3D models on any website, right? Where like what Pawel was saying, you have this like automated flow where all they need really is just like the input data for what they would already have, and then be able to produce a realistic 3D model from that. That's very exciting. In terms of like WebAR in the near term, I would expect this like explosive growth trajectory to continue. A lot of the experiences that we're showcasing earlier in the presentation, those are these very polished, very high-end experiences, and they're only getting longer and more interactive. And there's more time spent invested in the development process. There are campaigns that last longer and longer and longer. So I would expect to see a lot more brands, a lot more just walking around every day, running into more QR codes on cereal boxes and billboards. And so that's kind of the near term for us right now.
Amazing. So before we open the floor for the questions, I have one last question for both of you. And that is, what advice would you give to the audience looking to get started with 3D and AR? What are your, absolute main tips, and what would you suggest?
I would say I have one for each type of the viewers. So I have one for the artists and one for the product brands and retailers. So for the artists, I would say, and I'm talking from my personal experience as well, don't reinvent the wheel. So if you have a topic, if you have, let's say, you want to work on a bet, and then just work on the bet and take everything else from the marketplace. Like basically, even especially if you're starting out and you don't have a budget for it, then use free assets. When you like in time, when you work for an agency or you're just having bigger you have bigger clients, you can also pay for assets. But even for starters, just use the free ones, so that you can only focus on your perfect art, so your topic, and like just create the canvas out of what's already there. Don't try to make everything in the room. If you're making a room, because it won't get you anywhere, and you'll probably drop the project after 1 week or 2 weeks, and you won't get anywhere. So just focus on your asset to make it perfect on this part you want to show in your render, or if you're creating real-time scene, then on this one thing you want to focus on you want your recipient of your art focus on, and just create that, and everything else can be taken or bought if you have the resources. And for the retailers and product brands, I think I mentioned it already, like don't wait for the competition to adopt it before you, because if you have renders on your website and you think you're up to date, then you're not. And if you're just getting 360 spinners in your web browser and you think that's super hot, it's not anymore. I mean, you have to have it because everyone else has it, but that's the whole point. Like, don't wait for the next asset so that you have to catch up with everyone else, like be in front of the competition. And that would be my advice from basically experience working in startups, working in corporation, like the huge product brands, and working as an artist. So that would be it. Rigel?
For me, it's like I get a lot of questions from customers who haven't done this before, both on the agency and the brand side. And I'd say, on the brand side, it's like, don't be afraid to try something new. It's like you're while we've seen a lot of like more mature examples of like interactive AR content on the web, it's still very new. And so it's a very innovative space right now. And that means that, like, you know, as a brand, you can go out there and be daring and try this stuff out without really being you shouldn't be afraid of like of trying something that no one else has tried before, because you get all of these other benefits of both learning about it, becoming more familiar with it, but also being first to market. And that's been a big draw for a lot of brands early on. And we've seen with companies like Lego and Porsche, they just keep coming back and making more, refining, and trying out, you know, new levels of interactivity. And on the agency side, I would say, you know, a lot of times we see hesitation where they're like, oh, well, I'm coming from like a game development background. I don't know much about web, or, you know, I'm coming from video production and I make commercials for brands, but I've never tried to make AR before. You know, what should I do? Where should I begin? And usually what I tell them is, you know, lean into what you know. That's what's going to help differentiate your offering from other agencies. And it's going to make the space a lot more varied. If everyone came in as like an expert 3D web developer, we'd see a very particular kind of experience, and we wouldn't see things like more, polished, maybe, cinematic like experiences that could come from a video production firm. And we have a lot of resources available, not just us at 8th Wall, but also the web in general, right? I mean, it's been around for 30 years. And so you get to stand on the shoulders of all of that technological progress. It's like, you don't need to, to borrow Pawel's term, reinvent the wheel when it comes to things like, analytics. Just implement Google Analytics. It's a one-line thing. And now you know so much more about how users are using your AR. CSS animations, jQuery, you sort of get these things for free because you're developing on a web page. And so, definitely, whenever you're interested in trying this out, come to our website, begin with the sample projects, see a lot of the customer work, and understand that they started with the same sample projects, right? And they've changed them, they've kit bashed them, they've tried new things, and they've tested them. And then over time, they've refined it. And now they have something that they're really proud to put out in the world on behalf of their clients.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. We have quite a few questions coming in from the audience, so I'll just pick the first one. It says, what GL6 APEG of 3D, NVIDIA, Apple, Epic, and more are leaning heavily in the direction of USD. So how do you guys view the future of USD versus GLTF?
First of all, I would say that NVIDIA leaning into USD is a little bit of an overstatement, because as you might know, president of Kronos Group, which is group that developed GLTF format, is a VP in NVIDIA. So I would say they stand by the GLTF. But we actually had those, lately we had those discussions in the working group of the GLTF format. And right now, the way we see it, they don't necessarily have to be competitors, because like they were created with a bit of a different purpose. So GLTF was created originally to work with WebGL. So it was supposed to be just that distillation format, like very lightweight format that can run on anything. And USD idea, like the idea behind USD Pixar was a bit different, right? So you can basically transfer all the data. So like you have just one, like it's more towards authoring format than just a presentation format, so just the exchange format. So we don't necessarily see it as a competition, even though it might seem like this. We are trying to basically think of a way that they can work together, seeing that they're a bit different things. And even though right now, yeah, Google uses GLTF and Apple, of course, naturally uses Pixar format because they used to be one company, they don't necessarily have to contradict each other. We see an opportunity in actually supplementing each other, right? But right now, you just basically have GLTF for everything else and USDZ for iOS devices or Mac OS, and specifically USDZ, right? So the archived version of USD. So I would say they're sort of a bit different thing, although when people think of USD, they actually think of USDZ in terms of real time, and they don't get a connection to the whole USD idea, right? So yeah, I think that's my take on it. I hope it answers it at least a bit.
Rigel, you're nodding your head. So do you agree with that answer?
Yeah, I mean, like, from what I understand, USD, it stands for Universal Scene Descriptor, right? So this is something that, you could bring in, and it carries with it not just maybe one 3D model, but a bunch of other assets and information about the scene. So I think that's right. It's like largely seen as a presentation format. On Apple, whenever you view a USDZ file, it opens up a quick look window, which is a system level viewer. It's effectively a file viewer for USDZ. The Z means zipped. So it's just basically taking your USD, scene and then like putting it into a single file. I think from what I remember about this, the USD-Z implementation doesn't include all of the USD features. And so that, could be one thing to consider. Also, as it stands, you can't view USD-Z out like inside of web frameworks on iOS because it just sort of immediately attempts to open it in its native file viewer. So it's just a very different kind of, at least right now, a very different kind of experience where you're either viewing a single model and walking around it, or you're doing things like what we're doing, which is more like car configurators and driving things around and like, really pushing the interactive element of it.
So there's a follow-up question about, are there any reasons to use USDZ for iOS users? I think you kind of touched on some of that. Is there anything you want to add?
It's probably the biggest benefit, like you get viewer functionality out of the box. So yeah, you can open Quick Look and you can get it in AR for free, basically, right? So
yeah,
probably, and it's well, it's Pixar format. So again, like Apple is natural adopter of a Pixar format, so it's just compatible.
Okay. We have about 10 minutes remaining, so let's try and get through a couple more of these before we have to go.
Sure.
So any suggestions on how we can tackle the issue of detecting bottlenecks for a real-time AR application? For example, what are the major design principles we should keep in mind, and what are the most common bottlenecks in a real-time design for something like an application for converting 2D images to 3D model renders?
In terms of the bottlenecks, I think getting data in a constant fashion, so to speak, is the biggest issue, because like you have hundreds or dozens or hundreds of clients, and they don't deliver the 2D data in a consistent way. So you not always get like nicely laid down sections, etc. Sometimes you just get a photo, sometimes you just have a reference image, sometimes you have some old render from somewhere else. And so I guess I'm talking a bit about business challenge, but this is the biggest one in here, right? So you don't get the data in a very consistent fashion. That's why, well, actually, that's why it's nice to work with Arsenal, because we have so many artists that they can just like tackle each single model separately, right? So we don't have to worry about making it with small team size. But I'm not sure it answers the question, but I would say inconsistent data source is the biggest obstacle in 2D to 3D conversion. Wait, does it answer the question at least? System design portions.
Like, what is a general set of checking steps to keep in mind while generally designing real-time applications, in particular 3D rendering models and AR?
Okay, so we're right now working on an asset validator for this. So this plugin that we're working on will help you to actually create assets that are real-time ready. So we're basically working on a tool that will do it for you. But Rigel, maybe you can answer this question a bit better.
No, I mean, when you're designing real-time applications and I mean, I don't know, I have like very specific tips for like how to make photogrammetry models more performant. And I think performance is definitely something that you want to be thinking about throughout the whole process from beginning to end. And so, in that case, you'd want to, obviously decimate the model that's created tremendously. I think, a lot of even like these LiDAR scanning apps on iPhone can produce models in like the millions of polys, and you just need to be able to break that down and reduce it to at least tens of thousands, and then also those texture sizes are going to be massive so that every part of that model, looks correct. So, reducing that as well.
Okay, I think I touched actually, when I come to think about it, I touched on the subject a bit when I was talking about optimization of the assets. So one big thing that you're not necessarily aware of when you're an artist and working only on offline are the draw calls, right? So how many times does the GPU have to process the image to actually show the image in the very simple terms? So basically each single material makes the GPU to work again, and then it composes the images out of those sequential images. So when you're working on an offline render, like you don't care about it because you just press play and you go, get a snack and wait for it to render. But if you need the real time, so if you need it to render in milliseconds, it matters a lot, especially on a mobile device. So packing all the textures, so basically making all model one material, so baking it into one texture set, so you have just properly unwrapped, UV unwrapped model, and it's covered with one texture that's responsible for color, one texture responsible for roughness, one for metalness, one normal map, and AO. And this tremendously improves the performance. So maybe this is a big thing to keep in mind if you're not aware of, let's say, hardware architecture of, well, basically low-level rendering like ideas. So this is a very big thing. So the draw calls to bear in mind.
To take another question, can you give some more examples of how 3D and AR is used to bridge the gap between e-commerce and brick and mortar stores? So especially in the COVID lockdown years, how is it helping bridge the gap between the physical and the virtual worlds?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the beginning of the pandemic, we saw a lot of actually a lot of projects that were meant to go out had to shift completely the design sort of mid-launch from being an in-store experience to being something that people can try at home. And that was pretty fascinating to watch, actually, because something that was originally an image target on the inside of like a shoe store, for instance, they, sort of mid-launch, agencies were converting these things to be, work at home using markerless tracking, but still gave the same, told the same story, right? And those actually ended up being quite successful. And what's really interesting about that to me is that how they use the web and how instant things can be changed and modified, right? So they pushed out an update, right, which is really just the next time someone reloads the page or navigates to that website, it's now going to be a completely different app. They didn't have to wait for an app store review process. And, like I said, it allowed for, the end user to get roughly the same experience, regardless of whether they were in the store or not. And then, as lockdowns went into effect and new campaigns were launching, we saw a lot of attention spent on that in-home experience, and for both online shopping, but also just promoting movies that were coming out at your house, right, as opposed to in the movie theater. And so we saw a pretty big transition and acceleration, really, of a trend that was already happening, which is really pushing on wherever you are, or in-home experiences, or that sort of thing. So that was definitely a surprise.
Yeah. Pawel, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, but I think we have some more questions, and I would just complement what Rigel said. So yeah, let's go ahead.
So I think we have time to take just one last question. So I think this one is for Rigel. What would you prefer to get better reflections? Embed a relatively low HDR image into an AR experience, or just leave it to the engine defaults?
It's a great question. So, engine defaults in a lot of cases are actually, they don't add an environment map. And so what you end up getting is a model that like looks weirdly, it looks kind of dark because it's not reflecting anything but black. And so, that's always something that you want to think about, is to make your model look more realistic, but also to brighten it up and have it correspond more to maybe what you were looking at in Blender or Maya. You definitely want to add an environment map. And that can be done a couple different ways. With our system and the rendering frameworks we work with. So the first would be the real-time reflections, which we were showing earlier, is very simple. You basically just, in A-frame, in 3JS, you just add basically a line of code that does all of the work for you of creating, it's kind of interesting. It's like, what we do is we make a virtual 360 camera, and then we project the camera feed that we're getting from 8th Wall onto the inside of an inverted sphere. And then that virtual 360 camera records, is taking all of the texture data in, and then it's creating a map that's then converted into an environment map that's applied to your 3D object. So all of this is happening the entire time, and you don't really need to tweak it or anything. It's just sort of turning it on, and then all of a sudden, all of your models that have like a metallic property are now reflecting back, the world that you're looking at. The alternative to that would be like a static cube map, where you have something ahead of time that's just sort of reflecting lights maybe, or a scene, and that's also pretty easy to implement. But you'll need the HDRI cube map ahead of time for that.
If anybody has any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out directly. You have our contact details here. You can also scan the QR code and contact us directly. And the last thing to mention before we go is the CGTrader is offering a 30% discount off select items in the marketplace. It's for attendance only, so please do use this link to take advantage of this great deal. And we'll be sharing that link in the chat in a moment, so you can just click directly. I think you'll get it in your follow-up email. So thank you again so much for everybody for attending, to our speakers. This has been really insightful, and I think everybody will have learned quite a bit today about 3D and WebAR.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys, bye.